So politicians are beginning to notice the complaints of parents about the sex relationships and consent education that's been infiltrating schools. So we've got this article from The Telegraph here that briefs us on how Miriam Cates MP is setting up some sort of parliamentary committee for this. Conservative MP Miriam Cates has presented Prime Minister Rishi Sunak with a dossier of evidence on the nature and extent of indoctrination in relationships and sex education in UK classrooms. It includes an abundance of case studies of sex education materials devised for teachers which state that gender is fluid, as a fact, or include teaching that many parents consider age inappropriate. In some schools, children as young as 12 have been asked in lessons what they feel about oral and anal sex. Never trust a person that wants to talk to your child about their feelings towards sodomy. My 13-year-old child was taught that there are 100 genders, says one mother at an independent school in East Midlands. At that age, my children have been taught accepted terminology such as cisgender, non-binary and gender fluid, with no suggestion that many people would find these terms and ideology contrary to their beliefs, religious or otherwise. Another mother at a London state school said her child was taught about masturbation in their last year of primary school by teachers she barely knew. The new Social Covenant Unit, a think tank that Mrs. Cates co-founded in 2022, is preparing to publish the study presented to Mr. Sunak, which states that the nation's children are being put at risk by teachers with a radical ideological position on sex, gender and sexuality who are monopolising the RSE sector in the UK. And as we've been over in the past, we've seen the papers that Drag Queen Story Hour USA have put out, which says that they want to disrupt the reproductive futurity of the normative nuclear family, they want to introduce children to drag families, and they want to leave a trail of glitter that will never come out of the carpet, mentally speaking. So we know these people are malevolent actors.
In the words of Pink Floyd, hey teacher, leave those kids alone.
Yeah, didn't the lead singer of Pink Floyd recently put up a giant neon banner saying trans rights are human rights?
Yeah, Roger Waters, yeah.
That's embarrassingly cringe.
I know.
Broken clocks are right twice a day, I suppose. The new Social Covenant Unit report highlights other RSE resource providers, including the School of Sexuality Education, which is understood to have worked with more than 300 schools and states it has a sex-positive approach both in the classroom and in general. So in this article, James Esses is quoted as explaining that an independent girls' school in London has an after-school gender alliance club run by transgender sixth formers for very young pupils. So they're mentoring them and affirming the positives of this particular gender ideology, and so they are positioning authority figures with a sort of rapport between them and the younger pupils in order to recruit them into the identity, to raise their gender-based critical consciousness.
Creepy and weird.
If you'd like to know more about James Esses's work, you actually did a brilliant interview with him
very much.
on the website. If we can go to the next one, please, John. And that's free, and you guys can find out how about James was cancelled from his course for opposing, I believe it was Childline's affirmation of gender ideology.
He was opposing, he was training to be a practicing psychotherapist, I think, and he was also volunteering for Childline as well. And he did that for 5 years, and they kicked him off because of the backlash from his course and opposing harming children, which you think Childline would be all about. But no, apparently they're more interested in virtue signalling the current thing than actually doing what they're supposed to do.
Speaking of virtue signalling the current thing, I thought we'd look at a case study in particular, and I got some of this information from a thread by Caroline Fisk. She has actually looked at our very own local Swindon Council's guidance on, which are a terrible council, by the way, on sex education, and she's got a lot of information here. This followed one of the MPs, Nick Fletcher, standing up in Parliament and saying that this sort of thing is going on and he demands Rishi Sunak take action. And she did some screenshots and she included the full report at the bottom. So you can go and read her thread in your own time. You can also watch my coverage of Conservative Party Conference for how I met Caroline, quite fortunately, on the party conference floor. I gave an interview with her because she works for Conservatives for Women. We'd hoped to get her in the studio at some point, but she just has a very busy schedule. But she's doing some great work. So again, another free piece of content you can go and check out. So I thought we'd go through the guidance put out by Swindon Borough Council relating to relationships and sex education, because there is some unbelievable stuff in here.
My tax money paid for this. I mean, all of the people in the office that live in Swindon, which is the majority of us, have paid for this, which is directly antithetical to everything we believe.
Yeah, so
why is my money being stolen from me through taxes and being used to fund basically paedophile nonsense?
Yeah, well, we have legitimate grievances in this office to take objections with this, particularly because there are parents in this office whose children go to schools in Swindon. So they could be very well exposed to this kind of material. And I encourage every parent watching this not just to share this video so that you have an example of exactly what's wrong, but to look up the guidance in your own local area and ask the schools directly, is this being taught to my child in this school? And no matter what, withdraw your consent from your child to be sat in these lessons. Now, this is mainly secondary schools. I know some schools are introducing this kind of stuff in primary school education, but I couldn't find any exact examples in here. So look at your own local area and get informed about that.
I think the practice is still that they have to send out a permission slip, don't they?
Not in sixth form.
Not in sixth form, okay.
Lots of this is aged at 16 and up, so this will be sixth formers as well. So let's go to page 7. Instant focus of the curriculum is sexual pleasure, pornography, gender equality, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBT issues. There's one down, John, because the PDF has one extra page. There we go. See all this? They have loads of different statistics about what children aren't being taught and why it's really important that because they aren't being taught this in school, we're going to introduce it to them. There's also many of the other topics. Now, some of these are actually legitimate, like biologically accurate processes, like sexual organs, pregnancy, prevention, contraception, consent, warning signs of grooming. They don't mention LGBT in that particular part.
Warning signs of grooming? What's going on right now?
They also don't mention any people from Rotherham or Rochdale, because that would be inconvenient to the narrative. Yeah, and also signs of abuse in interpersonal relationships. So they're all worthwhile topics, but I'd like to just point out, number one, they're for parents to teach, right? And even if you did put it in a school, I do not trust you to not ideologically pervert the teaching, because as we can see in the rest of the document, it's all contaminated with gender critical queer ideology and sexual perversion.
It seems to me that at least in a couple of years' time, ideology is going to be the only thing taught in schools at this point. Like, there's not actually going to be a discussion of various perspectives. It's going to be taught as fact. And perhaps the other stuff is going to be thrown in just as, oh yeah, we kind of have to include this.
Well, this is because intersectionality has had a long conquest of our institutions, and because these intersectional ideologues are ultimately nihilistic, they don't have their own children, and so they want to have yours, and either propagandize and reach the communist utopia within one generation, or completely depopulate the population like Simone de Beauvoir wanted. So let's go to page 11, please. They ask, what is homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, and what effects does it have on people, and what I can do, or if a friend experiences it? So they have lessons like this, where they're trying to raise awareness as to a child always being on the watch for certain types of prejudice. And packaged into that is, of course, the idea that transphobia, trans as a category, objectively exists, and so you should ally yourselves with the oppressed trans community and play whack-a-mole with any offensive statements that you hear. On page 12, what are gender norms and attitudes to gender equality in different cultures? What are my personal values about gender roles and gender equality? And does pornography present particular values in relation to power, gender, and sexual behavior? So, all social constructivist Judith Butler-style gender ideology and the Foucauldian idea of sex is always in relation to power. Like, I remember there's a passage from Simone de Beauvoir that lamented that women in monogamous heterosexual relationships don't feel themselves sexually in relation to the world and being. Why would you want to feel relative to the world when you're sleeping with one person?
Well, Simone de Beauvoir didn't exactly practice that, did she?
No, she wasn't exactly the most monogamous of types, was she? Then on page 50, it asks classmates to classify behaviours as what good friends do. Okay, this might be something fairly banal. One of which is shares photos or videos of themselves or others having sex or their naked genitals, breasts or buttocks.
What?
How is this appropriate for children?
That's so weird. Why are they even talking about that?
Yes. On page 60, it lists resources for students to consult with questions. And it says the Tavistock and Portland Clinic. Right. So it's openly pushing children towards the clinic which has one of the highest rates of guaranteeing chemical and surgical transition from social questioning. So it's pushing children down the trans pipeline. Yep, page 62. It makes a game out of recreating a penis and vagina with food items so that participants will be able to identify the parts of sexual and reproductive anatomy of people that were assigned the sex of either male or female. So it's, again, packaging in social constructivism to biology, and they are meant to resent prostate fluid using white hand lotion.
That's really weird.
Children recreating prostate fluid.
I didn't even know prostate fluid was a thing.
I don't want to go there, right? I'm just going to... No. Page 84. Families and diversity. So it mentions co-parenting arrangements between multiple people, child-free families, and families with LGBT plus parents. No mention of the nuclear family whatsoever. So they're setting up normative models of how families are constructive, but they never say mum, dad, and kids. I think there's a reason there. Page 97. How far would you go for a friend? We can see where this is going.
Oh, dear.
If my friend told me she was non-binary, I would. If my friend started telling a racist joke, I would. If my friend told me to stop sending naked photos of myself because of the risks, I would. So in this, it is proposing non-binary as a very legitimate identity, YouTube. It is encouraging children to police each other's jokes on the grounds that they are on the constant hunt for racism, unconscious or otherwise, and it always assumes that children are sending naked photos or videos of themselves or themselves having sex with others. Like, if you're normalizing this behavior, you're going to present the idea as an opportunity for exploration to children. Why do you want kids taking photos and videos of themselves naked?
Yeah, it's a really weird presupposition to try and get I understand that these things are supposed to be to get them thinking about stuff, but the things they're trying to get them thinking about are clearly immoral and not intuitive to children. These are adult ideas being projected on young people, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I know people that work in child safeguarding in schools, protect their identity, and also we all went to school, we all heard about instances of people doing things that are inappropriate for their age. Let's put it that way, right? When those things happen, the safeguarding officers and people who are meant to deal with child well-being and social services are terrible, but let's say hypothetically social services did their bloody job. They're meant to be the ones that step in on a case-by-case individual basis. You are not meant to sit every child down for mandatory sex education and normalize this idea to children who would not otherwise be doing this, because children are highly suggestible. And so you are going to sexualize children from an early age. And because this is happening in so many places, packaged in with gender ideology, which is an explicitly Marxist revolutionary idea, I have no reason but to believe that this is deliberate, particularly because they keep asking Stonewall for advice in this very document. So we know the activists are having their input in this. We know that they have done some questionable things, like saying children as young as 4 can change their gender identity. And so I don't trust that this, specifically raising that children will be sending each other photos of themselves naked, is for a child's well-being. I would suggest that instead it is if not encouraging, at least thinking the idea is to be expected for more children than it currently is. And that's disgusting. Page 100. Why do people have sex? So they list having a baby, and they say, or you could save money to apply for your own housing, try house sharing with a friend, prove you are growing up by making decisions that are well thought through based on long-term positive goals, doesn't harm yourself or others, and you take responsibility for your actions and the consequences, or get a pet. So it's actively encouraging you not to have children.
How am I not surprised?
Yep.
Although, to be fair, if it's young people, like people who aren't old enough to actually be responsible, I do support them being encouraged not to have kids very young.
I support you not having children until it is financially responsible and inside a committed relationship, sure. But also, again, the weird presuppositions packaged into this, you should just get a pet instead of having a baby. This is the
People
attitude.
don't need encouragement for that.
Well, this is also the attitude of the antinatalist dog mums that we see repeatedly. And we're going to be dealing with that constituency as a voting bloc very soon. Like all of those resentful women that realise their biological clock is running out and they were lied to by feminists like Beauvoir, saying that there's no consequences emotionally or in terms of your lifelong happiness or even economic prospects as to not having children and just being a career boss girl instead. There's absolutely no problem with that. When women realise there is, you're going to get a very resentful revolutionary constituency that are going to blame capitalism for the reason that they didn't have kids, and so they're going to want to burn the entire society down to feel its warmth. And this is what this is engendering. Page 102. It lists signs of an abusive relationship. Okay, this might, again, be a topic where this is fair. Power is unequal. Great, more Foucauldianism. And they are constantly offering to take care of you. So it's stigmatizing dependency and being nice. So it's driving this weird atomization that lots of Gen Z in particular are feeling as to where you can't commit to someone out of fear of being reliant on them. That's not a very healthy way of forming relationships.
Well, I mean, I support people, not necessarily being reliant on someone, but it doesn't mean that you can't have an emotional investment in them and things like that. I think just the difference is framing. I think the difference is between dependency and reliance. So you can rely on someone in terms of they will be loyal to you. Oh, of course.
Yeah. But if you're emotionally dependent on someone, if you're codependent, and if that person disappeared, you would erase your sense of self, that's unhealthy. That's not what they're saying. They're saying someone constantly offering to take care of you is somehow to be pathologized. This just isn't very good for impressionable children. You're going to warp their sense of self.
If someone offered to take care of me, I mean, I know I don't need taking care of, but it's just a nice sentiment, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'd
I
just
often
be like,
cuddle
oh,
with the
no,
homies.
it's okay. That's very kind of you. That's all it takes. It's not someone being mean.
Yeah. But these people are not very well adjusted. Then on page 135, we have the gender gingerbread person. On the page 139, there is a diagram, but from page 136, it says assigned sex is to be used instead of biological sex because doctors will usually assign a sex to a baby, either male or female at birth, so sex isn't innate. Then they list about you can be intersex, you can have your gender, the ways that masculinity and femininity have been socially constructed, so not linked to biology at all. Gender identity, an internal sense or awareness that all people have as a range of manness or womanness that they feel about themselves. So, great, more social constructive nonsense. And gender expression, how a person publicly presents their gender. Believe me, we can tell. So the diagram is on the next page, please, John. 139. There it is. So not only have they nicked it from Shrek, but none of this makes any sense because they've got all these weird flowcharts, and I just think this is designed to deliberately confuse people.
The labels aren't even that accurate. Attraction apparently is in the heart rather than the brain, which is the scientifically correct position. You know, the heart just pumps blood. Apparently, between your legs is sex. That's the entire concept just contained in that area.
Yeah.
It's just weird labeling.
Also, identity. Right, okay. So gender is a social construction. Sex is purely arbitrary, right? It's only assigned at birth. But if you are born this way, male and female, so somehow you are born attracted to a social construction. It doesn't need to make sense. It's just postmodern nonsense to deliberately confuse you and make you revolutionary. Moving on. 150, as I said, uses Stonewall to define the guidance. Great. Page 182 to 184 includes questions for their sex education lessons, like, and this is not family friendly, so cover your children's ears, ironically. If I swallow sperm, will it do any harm to me? And could it in any way get me pregnant? And is masturbation going to make me not like girls? So it's your position, Josh.
You what?
Monk mode. On page 188, is masturbating a bad thing? Absolutely not. In fact, masturbation is a good way to find out what you like so you can share that with a partner when you're ready to handle the responsibility of a sexual relationship. Stop encouraging kids to be off. There are lessons about masturbation. They're constantly affirming it being
encouragement anyways.
It's not a good thing because you'll sit around being a Kuma and get nothing done all day. It also rewires your brain dopaminergically. So put the hand down, ladies and gentlemen, but they're encouraging kids to do this. Any adult that wants to talk to your kid about rubbing one out is not to be trusted. They deserve prison time. Page 197 recommends a lesson plan which uses trading Smarties to teach them about spreading STIs.
I don't understand how Smarties in any way. What is it? Just that if you have like a pile of Smarties and they go around.
Each Smartie is a different coloured STI. And so
you've got to catch them all.
Exactly. If you trade them, then you can understand how you can become like Ash Ketchum with a few one-night stands and slug and lettuce. Page 201.
Dino.
I'm not a Dino. We'll be covering that later. There's a Year 9 lesson called Taboo Touch. It's about masturbation, as you can expect. Most people of all genders, ages, masturbate or have at some time. Again, not appropriate. Page 212. 10 reasons to talk to young people about pleasure. Number 1, you're a nonce. We need to find a balance between the two extremes of no sex please we're British, God I miss the Victorian standards, and everyone is doing it. Talking about the pleasure of masturbation and sex can reduce difficult feelings of guilt and confusion and promote more positive feelings. So these people want to promote positive feelings about sex in your children. Okay, punishments needed. Page 221, there's a gay, lesbian, bisexual and trans power control wheel. Using things like economic abuse, intimidation, threats and coercion, and emotional abuse, isolation, denying, minimizing, and blaming. So if you don't affirm the existence of gender identity, you are committing abuse against a person. And also using children. This is a really interesting one. So it's abuse if you make someone feel guilty about the children. So apparently, saying you can either have a trans kid or a dead kid is child abuse, right? Oh, no. It's only child abuse to say, maybe we shouldn't give that 3-year-old chemical castration drugs. This is all conducted on the Conservative government, by the way. Conservative Council in Swindon, just so you know. So, would be nice if you could get rid of this, lads.
This is why I don't vote for the Conservative Party.
Yep. Page 238, the gender galaxy. I see your brow furrowing. No, it doesn't make sense. So, it says, what do we gain from using only 2 gender categories, male and female? It's easier, more convenient, traditional, fear.
Biologically correct?
Fear. They're associating fear with the gender binary. So they are innately saying that if you say men and women exist and are biological categories, you are using fear to corral children and indoctrinate them.
Well, children automatically sort themselves into these groups.
I mean, girls are icky. Ugh.
There are studies of apes who choose sex-specific toys, and you can't argue that they've been socialized because they're monkeys, right? And if it's so fundamental that even something that isn't nearly as intelligent as us can figure it out, well, apparently they're more intelligent than us on some things now. Like the male monkeys had the cars, female monkeys had the dolls. They were human toys, but they were still drawn to them. It's that basic. It's in your biology.
It's not meant to make sense. It's just meant to stigmatize you and your beliefs because it's an act of repressive tolerance to propagandize your kids against you. They also say, what do we lose by simplifying 2 genders? Freedom to be your authentic self, imagination, diversity, and inclusivity. So they're packaging in 1 letter away from equity, which is, of course, communism. And what happens when we break or do not fit into these limited gender categories? Again, they're saying limited, so they're automatically trying to stigmatize the idea of the gender binary. How does it feel and why does it matter? Bullying, threats, assault, self-hatred, isolation, feeling like you don't belong anywhere, social consequences due to discrimination, stigma, and prejudice. These people are constantly driving home the idea that biological correctness is evil and wrong and that you'll be shunned by your peer group. They are giving this to impressionable children. This is contemptible.
We should use the same sort of language that some of the progressives use against us and just say these are like anti-science. These are conspiracy theorists, science deniers, anti-biologists. I mean, I feel a bit lame using that terminology because it's associated with it, but it's applicable here, right?
Yeah, see your contemplations on science as to why current science is utterly polluted by ideology.
I wouldn't say a portion of it. It depends on the area.
A large amount of it. I mean, academia is
You can't know
malfunded.
all of science. You've not read every single research paper.
No, but Anthony Fauci declared he was the science, therefore I have reason to distrust it. All right, page 240, we've only got a couple left, has a long list of gender identity definitions, and the reason I bring this up is because it ends with two-spirited. Now, do you know what two-spirited is?
Is it someone who identifies as being 2 people in one body or something like that?
No, it's not multiple personality disorder. You're not the villain from Split. No, what happens is this is apparently a Native American idea that you can have 2 souls and you can almost have like an animal self or something, or at least that's how it's marketed, right? Turns out no, it was invented by a NAMBLA member and a Marxist activist called Harry Hay, who set up the Radical Fairies group in the 1990s. So it has nothing to do with the Native Americans. It says in here it's used by First Nations people in Canada. It's not. It's dreamt up by some pedophilic Marxist activists in the 90s. And we've just fallen for it. So get rid of that. Page 246 refers to pregnant people. Page 304 has a diagram on how to insert an internal condom. We're going to have to blur this. Yeah. Internal condom for men, by the way. Right? Page 322 says, abortion is a safe procedure and major complications resulting from it are statistically rarer than childbirth. So it says that you're better off having an abortion than having a child. I mean, it's not very safe for the child, but there's no debate about that. Page 469 has a whole glossary of LGBT terms, which we won't go over, but has things like cis-sexism, which says that cisgender people get preferential treatment because they don't recognise trans people as real women.
It makes it about as explicit as possible that this is just progressive indoctrination, if you haven't already got the message.
Yeah, and the last one has a glossary of terms for genital mutilation by nation. Now, this is quite interesting.
But it's female genital mutilation only.
Yeah,
not the male variant.
It does have circumcision under there, but It doesn't mention the nation of Israel.
Strange, isn't it? I mean, if you were to be even-handed, one might think that all genital mutilation of children is bad.
And it also doesn't mention trans surgery, which Richie Herron has reliably called a gender lobotomy. which I think is quite fair. So I just wanted to end on that. Also, the fact that loads of its infographics are from the Amaze Foundation, and they're a progressive sex and gender identity education organisation that partner with Planned Parenthood. So hence the pro-abortion stuff. The point being, why is any of this done under a Conservative council or Conservative government? Why is any of this in schools? It's obviously weird, creepy, overly sexualised gender ideology nonsense. Fortunately, we have forwarded this to a Conservative councillor in Swindon, and he says he's going to be hopefully forwarding this to the relevant MPs. So we'll let you know if there's any further action on this. But as I said to parents, go and look what's happening in your local area. Go and read these materials. Write some letters to your MPs and councillors. Kick up a fuss. Hopefully it goes into some sort of inquiry and it's made illegal. But until then, don't let your kids attend these lessons. And even if you don't get a notification asking for your consent, just say, I formally withdraw consent and I'll take action against the school if you put my kids in the classes without me knowing. It's the only way we can fight it.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Brokenomics series, this episode on digital IDs. If you'd like to find out what else is being out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.